Bravo Zulu, this is Victor Lima. We are RTB. This is Return to Base, a Veteran Life podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Return to Base, episode 2. We're here with Alden Mills. Very excited to present him as our guest today. He's a Division I athlete, a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, a Navy SEAL, an inventor, an Inc. 500 CEO, and the best-selling author of books Be Unstoppable and Unstoppable Teams. Please welcome Alden Mills. Hey, Alden, how's it going?
Hey, Cliff. Great to be here. How are you, brother?
I'm doing fantastic. It's finally sunny down here in Tennessee. Not too hot, not too cold. Fall's coming, and I like that. You're up in California, correct?
Yeah, I'm over in Northern California, Marin County area.
Awesome. I have a special place in my heart for California. Even though I've lived in Tennessee for a long time, and I don't plan on going back to California, but that's neither here nor there. I'm a San Diego
A lot
boy.
of people will say that. You're a San Diego guy, yeah.
Yeah.
Time down in sunny San Diego as well.
Yeah, I bet. I used to go down there and watch the seals run on Silver Strand and think, man, that looks freaking miserable. So I got all that right. Division I athlete, you were in crew, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And a graduate of the Naval Academy. And I was reading in your book a little bit about your time at the Naval Academy and crew. And I thought that story was fascinating, actually, because for those who haven't read, shame on you, but for those of us who have, Alden mentions that it was an unorthodox team that ended up achieving great results because of the mindset, not just the physical framework was there, but there was a certain mindset of those at the Naval Academy. Is that right?
It is. And what I would highlight on this, and this, by the way, applies to all the service academies, right? The service academies bring people in. There's no red shirting. You're there for 4 years. You can't bring in people from other countries. They're only Americans there. You have height and weight standards. You have academic standards. So in the world of rowing, taller people, really helpful, right? People from the Netherlands, from Serbia and Croatia, New Zealand, Australia, heavily recruited to a lot of places that we race against. And they are multiple year postgrads. A lot of them show up at 21 years of age. And here you have this Naval Academy crew who gets a small handful of recruits, of which I was one of them, but the large majority of the folks in the boat, they don't know how to row when they first show up. And yet year after year, Naval Academy crew with other sports as well, would show up in the national championship and be competitive, right? And so that was the story. That's the kind of the context behind the story of like, well, how do these seemingly uncoordinated, inexperienced teams come together and vie for national championships? And that always came down to, first and foremost, that mindset.
Right. And, I think that it's an interesting sport to participate in, given that you end up becoming a SEAL. Every single person on that boat, it's called a boat, right?
Yeah.
Every person on that boat has to pull their weight or the mission fails. You fail. And
not only that, it's 8 oarsmen getting 8 blades in the water at exactly the same time, right? From a teamwork perspective, it is probably the highest form of teamwork you're going to find in the sport. There's no high point scorer, right? There's no real MVP in the boat. Every single person has equal amount of importance, and it's only the fastest boat wins by who can act as one as the better boat.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way to look at it. Many people say that, like football, for instance, is the ultimate team sport because everybody has to pull their weight. But obviously, crew is not as popular of a sport. But I can see crew being way up there past football for where it is for as important as working as a team is, because like you said, one blade out of place, you're not going to win. And there's not another play. It's one race, right?
That's it. It's one race. And, I want to be clear from a team perspective. I don't think there's anything higher up there. From an athletic endeavor, we are definitely not the most coordinated athletes. Like, we sit on our butts and go backwards for long periods of time. And what we are really good at is learning how to suffer. But it was a perfect entree to go from rowing into the special forces world. In this case, in SEAL team.
Yeah. Now, let me back up a little bit. So obviously, you went to the U.S. Naval Academy. That's a process in and of itself. You have to get a recommendation by a congressman, correct?
Correct.
What led you to consider the Navy and to consider the United States Naval Academy?
I was one of these kids that got sent away to boarding school at an early age, right?
Not Hogwarts?
What?
Not Hogwarts.
No, not Hogwarts. Times it probably felt like that, though. I grew up on the East Coast, and the schools were going to hell in a handbasket for us. And my parents decided, like, hey, I think you're going to need some discipline and go to a place. And I ended up being that kid who was kind of born with two left feet. Any ball sport, I seem to only score on my own team. I scored on my own team in soccer and lacrosse and hockey, and basketball. I was terrible. But I saw this sport of rowing and I was like, oh man, I love this. Like, I just immediately gravitated toward it. And then as I started getting better at it, I started getting recruited. And originally I thought I was going to go row at some Ivy League school. But I always just kept looking at the Naval Academy and I kept saying, like, oh, this is a different path. And it was during my time in junior year, I heard about this force called SEAL Team and what SEAL Team stood for and what they were all about. Now, I grew up on the water. I was that kid who got certified to scuba dive at the age of 12. I would wear my mask and fin and watch the show Flipper and Sequest. Like, I love those things, right? I just love those. A water junkie. And at the 11th hour, I ended up getting dropped from this Ivy League school, and the Navy came knocking, and I was like, I'm going to do this. And I was the first kid in a long time from this boarding school to go to the Naval Academy.
Wow.
And I loved it. Now,
that's awesome.
It was also the best of times, worst of times there. I had some discipline that I had to get used to. But that kind of service really fired me up.
Interesting. Now, the time frame that we're talking about is 1990s being in the Naval Academy. Is that correct?
Yeah, 87 to 91.
87 to 91. That's an interesting time to be joining or volunteering for the service as change of administration, the Cold War, crying out loud, being done. And so it's interesting that you chose the SEALs, and we don't need to get into operational specifics, but I'm sure they kept you plenty busy, even though there wasn't the quote unquote big muscle movement type wars.
Yeah, I have this vision, and this really kind of brought us home. We have this trophy room at the Naval Academy boathouse. And in the trophy room is a large TV, and the coach said, we're going to stop what we're doing for training for a moment. I want you all to come in here. And this was a senior. I was captain of the crew. Turned the TV on, and we were watching the invasion of Iraq. And he said, hey, you know those guys that you rode with last year? They're right there. They're in that Marine Corps division. You know these guys. They're there. That's why we're really here. Yeah, we're here to win some races, but the real races are those out there. And when that kind of process hit home, it really kind of emboldened you and kind of hit you with the reality, like, hey, this is what we're really training for. And so when we went off in the SEAL team, I went headfirst in, and I ended up volunteering for this group that drives classified combat mini submersibles. and I did 2 tours driving these little mini subs all around the world. I loved it. Before I went to a conventional team, which would be, they call it relatively conventional, SEAL Team 2.
Right.
Yeah, we did a lot of clandestine stuff.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And coming out of the Cold War was a perfect opportunity to show off some of those unconventional skills that, quite frankly, we've gotten away with or gotten away from a bit during the global war on terror, unfortunately. But so you finished the Naval Academy knowing full well that you're not going to go be an F-18 pilot.
Yeah, that's not happening.
How tall are you anyways?
6'3".
6'3", yeah, that would be a tight squeeze, but I think you could still do it. But you're not going to be an F-18 pilot, and you volunteer for SEAL training. Did you have a backup plan as to, hey, what happens if you wash out during BUDS, or were you just so focused and committed that you just knew you were going to make it?
The big first backup plan was whether I was going to get a billet out of the Naval Academy. It was touch and go. I was the last one to get a billet. And in part, that's because of my class rank and my number of demerits. That was low. I'd consider myself top 10% of the bottom fifth. So the backup plan there was I was going to go to an oiler out of New Jersey, get qualified as quickly as I could, and then transfer into SEAL team. I did not have a backup plan if I quit, got medically dropped from SEAL team.
Right. And for those who don't know, obviously there's a significant washout rate in the SEAL team and SEAL training BUDS from injury and some folks just not being there 100% mentally. Same with me. I trained with Special Forces. I went to the Special Force qualification course and my Green Beret. And a lot of folks end up just quitting and you're like, why? But hey, if that's what you want to do, I'm glad you quit is the way I looked at it.
And that was the same attitude I think everyone else had too, right?
Right.
You only want those that are all in all the time.
That's right. And so let me ask you this. So you're in the SEALs. You're obviously, you're an officer. So you enter, I guess, BUDS as an ensign. Is that correct? And you're expected to lead pretty much right away. Did you ever think to yourself while in BUDS that you were applying some of the leadership principles and lessons that you learned from crew, say? Because all these things are building blocks, I think, to a total person. And I imagine that you had some lessons in leadership that you learned from your time with the Naval Academy and rowing crew.
Cliff, that's all I had. You're 100% correct. Every time I got myself wondering, what am I going to do now? The first thing I would do was think back to, okay, what did I do when I was captain of the crew? Right? The times where I actually thought about quitting, this one time in particular during Hell Week, it's Tuesday night. Hell Week is this time period for the listeners who are not sure about it. It goes from Sunday to a Friday. They give you a total of 3 hours of sleep for that week. Ironically, they think once you go through Hell Week, you're like a Navy SEAL, but it's only the 6th week of training, right? It's an initial calling process. And our class had gone from 122 down to 18. And there's one officer, me, and 17 enlisted. And they pull me aside and they say, "Sir, why do you think so many people are quitting?" It was a winter Hell Week. So I thought, well, it's cold out or whatever. And they're like, "No, sir. It's because you are a terrible leader. They're all quitting because of you. So we want you to go over here, ring the bell, and we're just going to mold this class and roll it into another class." When you get faced with those kinds of question marks, that's the first thing that you go to. It's like, okay, well, what am I doing wrong? Like maybe they're right. And you're so tired already. You're kind of questioning yourself. Everything that I had was going back, not to some book I read, but to what I had experienced or learned from others in another sport where I was being pushed to my limit, right? Where we get pushed to our limits is where we really learn who we are and what's going to work and what isn't going to work.
That's absolutely right. They say fire hardened steel, right?
Yeah. Iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron. That's it. In the SEAL teams, let me back up. So you finish buds, having already faced a significant amount of adversity.
Yep.
And do you feel that conversation from, it's probably a chief or something like that who came up to you and asked you to ring the bell? Can you put a pin in that conversation in your life and say, wow, that might have changed everything? Because it sounds like what he did was he put you to a point where he was giving you an opportunity, a way out, but he was also testing your leadership mettle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There are these moments, I call them pivotal moments, where you're at this Y in the road and you have this decision to make. We had this, he was a warrant officer. And right before we started all of SEAL training, and he talked in a deep Southern accent, and he said, you know what? My job is to create a conversation in here. And he took his index finger, right? Put it up by it's to create a conversation to get you to decide what you're going to focus on. You're going to focus on the pain of training, or you're going to focus on the pleasure that training provides you. Right?
Right.
And you go on and say, 80% of you are going to focus on the pain. You know why? Well, because you want to be a SEAL on a sunny day. And your country, you don't need SEALs on sunny days. Wow. And I thought about that conversation, and I got that conversation a lot. Yeah, okay, you could put a pin on that particular night because they almost had me for a second. They got me thinking like, oh my God, am I really that bad of a leader? No, I'm an ensign. Of course you're a bad leader. You just started out, right? The best leadership I got was from all my NCOs who had done many deployments before me. And they're like, hey, sir, let me show you how this works over here. They took me under their experience wings and they brought me along. Then there was times where I got forced with a medical drop because they found out that I'd been taking asthma medication because I had been declared an asthmatic and I was sneaking it and I got busted. My lungs started bleeding and they're like, you shouldn't even be here. They rolled me and they put me back and they gave me another huge out. And I said, no. Okay, I'll stop taking the medicine, but I got to figure out a way to get through this. And then there are times where you're thinking, I don't know if I can do this 20-mile run in the middle of the night or this long swim. Like those conversations come to you all the time. But after a while, you get used to that voice, right? In the first chapter of Unstoppable Teams, I talk about that conversation about leading yourself and I call that voice the whiner. And the more you hear that whiner chirping away at you, well, the more you know you're on the right path, pushing yourself out of that comfort zone of familiarity. And moving forward into a place that's going to make you a stronger, better person.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned something earlier too about the suffering. I always love that word, suffer. I coach youth sports, for instance, and I remind the kids that there's a few things that we do together. We win, we lose, and we suffer.
Yes.
And
I love that.
If you ask the kids after practice, the other coach says, hey kids, what did coach teach you? And they all just said to suffer. But there's something about the suffer, the suck, right? That is almost addictive in a weird way, because you start feeling like, all right, you know what? I know what that feels like. And I know what the endorphins and everything else that I'm going to get when I get through it. And a leader in the Special Forces qualification course, one of my NCOs that told me, he said, hey, that sucked, didn't it? I go, yeah, it did suck. You're welcome. You're going to have so many fun stories because it sucked so bad. You wouldn't even, if it didn't suck, you wouldn't remember.
I love that. He's right.
He's absolutely right. And as a matter of fact, all the fun stories I kind of have throughout my military career, hardly any of them are the like good things I want to remember. It's the times that really sucked and you laugh out of that.
Yeah. Because it makes you feel alive, right?
Yeah, that's right.
The pain and the pleasure that comes afterwards, that lets you know you're alive.
That's right.
How lucky are we to be able to feel these feelings?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So I don't want to put you on the spot here, but in your time in the SEAL teams or even in training, you have a funny little story or something that you remember as, oh, wow, that was hilarious.
Oh my God. Yeah, I got all kinds of them.
PG-13.
I was going to say, I got some that are way out of PG-13, but okay, this is PG-13, and it will go to show everybody that we all have moments of weakness. Mm-hmm. In our Hell Week, they decided that we were going to T&E. That means test and evaluate. In our case, that means we're going to be guinea pigs. These tri-shorts. Tri-shorts are nothing more than a pair of kind of like long jockey underwear, right? Like boxer briefs, but they stick to your legs, right? We call them tri-shorts.
Are these under the UDTs?
Yeah, they were under UDTs. They were under your BDUs because we basically wore our BDUs the whole time.
Right.
Our battle dress uniform, our camis. And back then we were wearing these World War II outfits. The idea was that we're going to wear these things so we wouldn't get so badly chafed and everyone wouldn't get cellulose infections in their thighs. And then they would get medically rolled back and then have to go through Hell Week again. But what they didn't appreciate was they never give you time to urinate. So you would just urinate in those tri-shorts constantly. And because you're wet all the time, nobody ever knew that you were peeing in your pants standing up, right? Or you're waiting for the next person. You're like, oh, you're just relieving yourself the whole time. Until it was Tuesday in the middle of the night where you finally have to go number 2 for the first time.
Oh, Lord.
And they bring you in and they're like, you got 10 minutes to go to the head. And one by one, we get into the bathroom. We're lined up, get to the John, and you just like, oh my God, I really got to go. And you rip those freaking tri-shorts off. And when you did, you ended up ripping off huge chunks of skin that had melded into the tri-shorts with all that urine because it had just eaten away. And then your skin was totally raw and flesh. And you'd hear guys one after the other, and we're just crying like little babies, right? We're like, and we're whimpering as we're trying to have a bowel movement in the bathroom. And as they come out, and I got tears running down my face, and I see this guy, and he's in my class, and he's a stud. And he looks at me, and he's got tears all over his face. He goes, sir, when I walk out this door, I am quitting. This is the most pain I've ever had. And they knew exactly what they were going to do next because there was a guy that they heard what was going on and they just hit the surf zone right afterwards, all this raw, right? And I looked at him and I grabbed him. It was the only time we got to look at each other because we got to see a mirror. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, Gary, look at me. I'm in as much pain as you. I've just cried like a little baby. I got no skin left between my thighs. He goes, oh my God, it's the same thing with me. I go, do me a favor. Just stick it out until the sunrise. That's all I ask you to do. And let's check in. Mm-hmm. He sticks it out. We cry some more because we get put right in the surf zone to become the honor man of our class.
Wow.
The number 1 student of the class, right? And here it is. We all had those moments.
Yeah.
And there was that moment right then and there that I will never, ever forget. And every time I put my underwear on, I think about that moment.
Now that, or every time you have a bowel movement, right? Mm-hmm. And by the way, for those,
doesn't matter how bad it is, because it's never as bad as that time I had that one.
That's right. That's right. And hitting the surf with skin ripped off has got to be a bit frightening. For those who don't know, there's I don't know if you call it a jet stream or the version of a jet stream in the water, but it goes right from Antarctica and lands directly on Coronado Beach in the Pacific. It's the coldest,
so miserable.
Coldest water. It doesn't matter if it's July or August, it's still going to be cold. So yeah, moving on to, so you did a few years in the SEALs, held 3 commands in the SEALs. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did 3 platoons.
3 platoons. And eventually you decided to transition out of the military. What led you to make that decision, and what was your plan as you were preparing to make this transition?
There are a couple of things that led me to make the decision. One of them had been, I had been so fortunate with these 3 platoons. I had some other opportunities to go on to some other SEAL teams. So I was like, if I go to these other SEAL teams, I'm going to go in and I'll stay for another 4 or 5 years. I'll be there for 12. Then I might as well stay in for 20. And I had felt so lucky to have all these different experiences. I think it's time for me to go and do something else. And it was also at a time where we were still, quote unquote, in time of peace, even though you're doing mostly clandestine work. That was all clandestine work. And I applied, went to business school. And I remember sitting in the business school class. I jumped out. I'd done a high altitude, low opening jump on literally like a Friday. And then on Monday, I'm sitting in a quantitative skills review program at Carnegie Mellon, surrounded by engineers. And I'm thinking to myself, good God, what have I done? Because, from 18 to 30, I'd been in the military.
Right.
And now I'm with these civilians and I can't understand why they're crying because they think they failed a test when I know I failed a test. I remember telling them all the time, you got nothing to cry about. You don't have to worry about your parachute not opening. You don't have to worry about running out of air. You don't have to worry about somebody shooting you or the bomb going off. It's just a test. Don't worry. They'd look at me like I was a freak.
Yeah.
That was a transition. That was a hard transition.
I bet. You went to business school. Did you think that you were going to leave your military life behind and just kind of keep that in your memory bank? Or
Yes, I did. I actually did, Cliff. For a while, I was like, well, I just got to compartmentalize this. And now I got to go be Alden the civilian.
Right.
And for a while, I really did think that. And the more I thought that, the more miserable I got.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like a ship without a rudder.
Mm-hmm.
I was bouncing around. I was like, okay, I'm going to play the civilian game in business school. And the civilian game in business school was, hey, well, let's go see how much money we can make and how quickly we can make it, right? The scorecard went from being the best teammate you can be to how much money can I get for myself, right? The scorecard in the military and these special forces groups and all these places you and I served, it was all about selflessness. And then all of a sudden you get thrust into an environment where it's all about selfishness. And I was really miserable.
Wow.
Depressed, right? And made a series of mistakes. I got caught up in it and I was like, okay, well, if that's the case, I'm going to win at this game and I'm going to go take this job and it has all these stock options. I'm going to make all this money and everything. And then I got there and I'm like, this sucks. This is what this is about. And within, I graduated business school in 2000. By the time, and I moved out to California and I started the job at the end of May. And by September, I had already joined the reserves. I got picked up for lieutenant commander in the reserves. And then September 11th happened a year later. And I'm like, okay, I'm out. I'm done. I'm going back in. I still had my clearances, looked at some other government agencies at the same time. And all I wanted to do was get back to being in the military because I was like, I'm not making it as a civilian was my mindset.
Interesting. And we'll get back to September 11th in just a bit. But I do want to ask, because I experienced it a little bit myself when I went to business school. I guess I'd been in the military, the Army for 17 years or so by the time I got to business school. And what was your experience with being that Navy SEAL in your class? Because I imagine before 9/11, people almost had no idea other than, there's some pretty good movies from the 90s about the Navy SEALs.
Yeah. Charlie Sheen kind of movies. Yeah?
That's right. Or Demi Moore.
Yeah. Oh, God. How could I forget? G.I. Jane. Yeah. That's great. I always like the Chuck Norris movies better. Delta Force had better movies.
Yeah. So how did the people receive you and how was that a challenge or did you use it to your benefit?
Did I use it to my benefit? I used it as a survival technique. Okay. I made the decision I'm going to go to a small technical school. I ended up going to a place called Carnegie Mellon. And the large majority of everybody already had a master's in engineering. Okay. I was a political scientist from the Naval Academy. Math and I don't really see eye to eye.
Right.
They Carnegie Mellon admission staff's like, well, you don't really have the grades, you don't really have the GMAT scores, standardized tests, but we're trying to diversify and we need some people with some leadership background. So we're going to take a risk on you. Literally, that was kind of the conversation that said, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so glad they did because I really started using that leadership to like, okay, I've got to go find the best I didn't know how to do a spreadsheet. Like, Excel spreadsheet, I would get this Excel Dummies for Dummies 101 and be like, click enter, and I did not, I was like, oh my God, I have so much to learn. I got to go find somebody who knows how to do this stuff. And then I just started building these diversified teams. And that's when things really started to click for me. Like, oh, this is a skill that I got that I can use.
Right. There's definitely attributes you can use, especially when we started looking at small projects. This is my comfort zone. When you have a project with 5 people and you have to be cross-functional and you have to be able to tell someone, hey, you need to do this, and they need to hold them accountable. And that's always hard. And definitely in civilian education there's always that person. There's memes about it. There's always that person who's not going to show up, not do what they're supposed to. But,
yeah.
But on 9/11, where were you? Everybody remembers where they were and everybody knows how they felt. If you don't mind, tell me where you were and what it made you feel.
I was on the first floor of a studio apartment at 500 Stanyan Street, which is on the corner of Stanyan and Hayes in the Haight District of San Francisco, on a rowing machine, working out, and my phone started going, and I don't watch TV when I get on this rowing machine. And so it's early in the morning. I started rowing at like 5:45. The first plane hit, I think, at 5:47 Pacific time. And somebody starts calling. And I'm like, oh, God, they're going to wake Jennifer up. So I picked the phone up. I'm like, what? He goes, you got to turn the phone on. You got to turn the TV on. Turn the TV on. I turned the TV on. And by the time the lag was, I turned the TV on. I'm like, oh, my gosh, plane. That's a big plane. That's not a small plane. I watched the second plane hit the tower.
Wow.
And then at that moment, I just flipped a switch. I got off the rowing machine. I called the CEO of the company and I said, I would recommend strongly not to bring anybody in right now. I believe this nation is under attack, and I think we need to initiate some protocols, and let's talk about what they should be.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. It's funny. It mirrors a little bit my experience. I was in Germany. I saw a plane. I saw on the news the plane had hit, and I thought, what an idiot. Who hits the road? And then by the time I got to my house, I turned on television, and I think I turned on television right as the second plane was hitting. And that led me on a path. I wasn't in Special Forces then, but it led me on a path to ultimately join Special Forces in a roundabout way. But
where were you in Germany?
I was in a little town called Mannheim, which is in Western Germany. Beautiful little town. Right outside Heidelberg, really. But
I spent time in Panzer Kaserne.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, beautiful place. Well, obviously, September 11th, it's been 20 years now. And recent events, I know every veteran, especially from our era, has an opinion or has some feelings. So what are your thoughts about how we left Afghanistan, if you don't mind?
It's one of the few times in my life where I was not proud to be an American. That was crushing to watch that. And I didn't serve in Afghanistan. Now, I lost some great teammates in Afghanistan. And a matter of fact, the first Navy SEAL to die in Afghanistan, Neil Roberts, he And his death is what propelled me to write the first book, The Unstoppable, because I knew Neil's son was going to get a just in case letter from his father, and his son was only 18 months old. And I was like, man, I wonder what he wrote to his son. And we started having kids at that time. And that's what started me writing that book. And I have to tell you that it made me think about Neil's son, who's now an adult. I'm like, well, how does he feel about the fact that, well, his father died in vain, right? Do all of our injured vets out there who've lost limbs and, dealt and battled with depression, how do they feel about that? And so a piece of me is just really disappointed. Another piece of me is mad.
Right.
And then a third piece is like, I think we're losing sight of, we're getting too focused on this short term. And I remember when we were serving in Bosnia and this British SAS officer, we were doing some work together, and he's like, hey, mate, you Yanks, you don't have the stomach for this. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I'm not talking about the fight. I'm talking about the occupation.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, you got to stay there for at least 2 or 3 generations to see peace. Right? Look at what we did with Germany.
Right.
We didn't do it after the first war, but after the second one we did. 70 years later, you got multiple generations of Germans growing up seeing peace. Same thing in Japan. Same thing in Korea. Right? And my opinion is, I don't understand why we are giving up all of this hard fought strategic points. And you may argue, well, it's not really that strategic in Afghanistan. You know what? The frictions of society have now shifted. We are no longer dealing with just first world issues. We are dealing in the friction of places like Iran and Pakistan and Iraq. Mm-hmm. And the Middle East is where the last pieces of friction of society are. Why aren't we shifting at least a couple of our bases from places that we've known been successful? I'm not saying give up all that, but start owning some of that real estate and saying, hey guys, guess what? We're owning this. We're owning these pieces of dirt for the foreseeable future. And we'll be rotating our soldiers through here.
Right.
And we're going to do our best. So, I know it's not that easy, but it's really frustrating to watch how that went down. And it just looked like we didn't know what we were doing. That's the other frustrating. Yeah. I get it if we're making the decision to leave for good, but it just very, and I talked to a lot of other veterans about the same thing.
Yeah, it's frustrating for sure. Obviously I'm a veteran, but my brother is also a Special Forces veteran now, retired CW3, served time in Afghanistan, did 2 trips in Afghanistan actually. And strategically, you're right. We made a lot of mistakes along the way. The thing that always stuck out with me of Afghanistan, if you fly over Afghanistan, sometimes you can see a village in a valley, then a mountain, 15,000 feet tall, and then another village in a valley. And it dawns on you, those people, until recently, probably didn't even know about each other.
Yeah.
And definitely didn't see each other as countrymen. And that I think was one of those signs where you can look at it and say, wow, I don't know if we'll ever be able to make this into a Western democracy, or, nobody knew what the plan was. Let's be honest. We were there. We accomplished our objective very quickly, I think, after September 11th.
Yeah.
And then we mucked it up, let's be honest. But along the way, great deal of fantastic Americans, men and women, served there, and many lost their lives. I know many, as do you. And I think that we can't lose sight of, we walked away with the strategic defeat, but we really honed our fight. there's still a lot of fight in us. And
without question. And I totally appreciate there is definitely a debate on, hey, how long do we want to be there? What's the point of why we want to be there? But let's also be honest on the fact of, we now have a over the horizon capability. We had an over horizon capability 20 years ago.
Right.
And we are still going to have the collateral damage that we just had.
Yeah.
So let's not hoodwink anybody into telling them like, well, it's okay, we can leave now. We have no, we still can't do battle assessments over the horizon. We don't have robots walking around saying, oh, look at the stuff we just gleaned from taking out this person. Oh, gee, looks like we killed a whole bunch of villagers too.
Yeah.
So let's call it for what it is. Right. And what capabilities we really have and what we don't have. So
that's a fair point. Over the horizon capability, like you said, it's almost fiction. We have it, but it's definitely not boots on the ground.
It's over the horizon destruction is what we have. And we're very good at it. We're not guaranteeing we're going to destroy the right things, right?
Yep. Doesn't bring about a strategic end, that's for sure.
No.
Segue a little bit into your time after the military. Obviously, you invented a piece of equipment called the Perfect Pushup.
Yes.
Right? How did that come about? Reading through your resume, reading through the bullet points of your life and career, it's like, what can't this guy do?
Well, I just woke up one day and there was this idea and I just wrote it out. And whammo. 6 months later, it's all done, created.
That quickly
No, not at all. That's what everybody thinks it was. No, it was the overnight success that took 10 years, and that wasn't my first product. I had started a company and I wanted to link fitness products together and use Bluetooth technology, and I failed miserably. And I started another company called Body Rev, and I was going to create the world's greatest fat burning device. Raised $1.5 million, then learned $1,475,000 worth of ways not to launch a product. I was broke, go bankrupt. You're embarrassing yourself, right? And I was like, you know what? Screw you guys. You don't know what you're talking about. I know more about this than you do. Mm-hmm. And it was on the third attempt when I was sitting around just thinking about going bankrupt that I'm like, you know what? And I convinced my very small team of 5 people, give me 90 days and let's see what could happen if we just made this thing. What would happen? I got them thinking about the positive.
Right.
And about, 87 days later, we launched the Perfect Pushup, in the back of 3 magazines, Outside Magazine, Men's Fitness, and Men's Fitness, Outside, and Men's Journal. Right, little tombstone ad.
Right.
And we sold out. And we got another container. And a couple other little sellouts. We still weren't making any money. And I'm like, hey, we got enough money. Let's try to do an infomercial at 1 minute because I had spent a lot of money trying to do them at 30 minutes.
Right.
And then things started to take off.
I remember those commercials.
Yeah. But let me just remind you, I started my first journey in 2002. Mm-hmm. I made the Inc. 500 in 2009.
Wow.
And then when I made Inc. 500 as the fastest growing consumer products company, we were 4th overall. Right after that came out was exactly like you talked about with taking a little pin and saying, hey, was that a transformative moment when you were thinking of quitting SEAL team? I'm like, yeah, you can take that same pin and put it on that day that Inc. magazine came out, because I went from hero to zero 3 months later. Because that was the beginning of what Obama called the second Great Depression.
Right.
Not to close on a huge round of funding. Didn't happen. 3 months later, the bank froze our line. They want to call it. They want to liquidate all my possessions because I didn't have 8.8 million out there. And I was looking at bankruptcy for the 3rd time.
Wow. That's a lot of adversity to take on. And especially as a leader, you have people who are relying on you to feed their families and looking up to you. And I imagine that even as you're struggling to put a business together and to make a buck, those lessons from crew, those lessons from the SEALs
They start stacking, right? They just start stacking, and you start realizing like, hey, maybe these things kind of happen for a reason. And then you kind of start geeking out on the idea that maybe that wasn't so coincidental after all. And maybe I just got to put my head down and embrace this next round of suffering. And look what I'm learning from it, right? And old voices come to you about, you know what my job is? Oh my God. Okay, I got to do that again, right?
Are there emergency procedures and checklists for a failing business, as there are when when an instructor's pulling your air tube out or putting a kink or a knot in it?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes. And there are.
There are. Let's hear
the hard way, right? And one of those key things is if you're in an inventory business, you better trust but verify who's ordering what and when. What got us sideways was Walmart would say, this is how much we want. You build it. And we'd be like, okay, you tell us how high, we'll jump.
Right.
And then they froze on it. And oh my gosh, we ordered more than we could afford. And we got sideways really fast. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Paying attention to cash flow is a really important thing.
Yeah. And do you think that round of adversity post 2008, probably 2008, post 2008, how did that inspire you to kind of take yourself to where you currently are? I know that among your many things that you do, I suppose it's called coaching, right? Executive level coaching, high level coaching for building teams, fighting through adversity. How did that inform your future business plan or your future business model where you were relaying some of these lessons?
When we were getting advice to file for bankruptcy now for the third time, I'm sitting in my office late at night and I'm opening the mail and I'm just like, is this how this is supposed to play out? Am I supposed to now buckle after the third time? And I opened this letter that was handwritten in like a number 2 pencil. And it said, Dear Mr. Perfect Pushup Man, my grandmother gave me the Perfect Pushup Basic. That meant she bought it at Walmart because we only seen it there. And I followed your workout plan 4 times. Workout plan is 3 weeks long, so it's 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I made the JV football team.
Wow.
Thank you for inventing the perfect push-up. Next year, I am trying out for varsity. Johnny, number 25. And I realized that I had made a mistake, like the one I had made when I came out of business school. And I got caught up on the civilian scorecard. How much can I make and how quickly can I make it? And right then and there, I took that letter, I moved bulletin board that we had on wheels, put it right in front of our entryway of the company. And when everybody walked in, I had a big statement that said, this is why we were in business.
Right.
To help people go beyond what they originally thought was possible, or in this case, help people achieve their goals. That's why I really wanted to create fitness products, because I was this asthmatic kid who scored against his own team in all different sports.
In lacrosse, that's really hard.
It is not if you're the goalie and you're trying to go right in front of the goal and it goes too far back and it rolls right out of you and rolls right into the net. Remember, I wasn't that fast either.
Right.
I remember that shift. That was another key shift, right? Just like we brought up earlier, that was another thumbnail shift of like being congruent with why I was doing what I was doing in the first place. Congruent on my heart and my head being in alignment. That's what I mean by congruency, right? You could always tell the congruent leaders because they were transparent, they were authentic, you knew exactly where you stood with them at any given time. If they barked at you, they were barking at you to help you, right? Mm-hmm. They weren't giving you some BS. They just were there because they cared for you. And as I started going through it and saved the business, got it righted again, and then sold it, and then worked for a larger company for a series of years, then I took a break. And I moved overseas with a family, sat down, and I was like, okay, now I'm going to write a second book, and I am going to figure out ways to teach folks that want to be taught how to help them be unstoppable. because the fact of the matter is we all have this gift to be unstoppable. The challenge is we have to choose to do that.
Mm.
And the choice is hard at times, right? We got so many things bouncing around and lots of whiners that we surround ourselves with. The news loves whining.
Right.
At some point, we've got to dig in there and lead ourselves. And how we end up leading ourselves directly impacts how we lead others. And how we lead others directly impacts the culture of the organizations that we choose to be a part of. Same thing with the communities that we're a part of. Right. Mm. And so what I think veteran life is all about is a call to service. It's a call to service, and that we few special lucky vets get the opportunity at an early age to know what it means to serve and then be that force multiplier within our communities.
Love that. I love that term, force multiplier. It's probably my favorite term to describe special operations, and you could use it it applies to so many things, right?
Yeah. To me, every veteran out there is a force multiplier in the civilian world. Mm-hmm. We are those lucky few that made that faithful decision a long time ago to learn what it meant to embrace the suffer.
That's right.
Regardless of what branch of service you're in, and make a shift from being selfish to being selfless. And now we must continue to do that in the civilian world. They're looking to us.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's your call to service when you raise your hand continues past the time when you get your DD 214. Others do look to you. Obviously, we had a big list to go down, and wish we had more time to hit everything, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I really appreciate you sitting down with me and talking about how you learn to be a leader, remembering and embracing the suck. I have a hoodie that I wear that says "Embrace the suck," and people always laugh at that. But
I'm very much appreciative of what you're doing. This doesn't have to be the last time we talk. And just remember, you are a force multiplier with everything you're doing here. So keep up the great work, brother.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And we will do that. We'll do that with veteran life and in the veteran community at large. I think it's important to get out there for all of us. Really appreciate your time, Mr. Mills, Alden, and we'll talk again real soon.
As we say out there, Charlie Mike. Go
Charlie Mike.
Mission.
That's right. Thank you.
Take care.
All right, everybody, another podcast down. That was Alden Mills. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to Alden for joining us on this podcast, the Return to Base podcast. Again, just a fantastic resource, fantastic success story, and an interesting person to talk to. Absolutely. His website is beunstoppable.com. That's BEUNSTOPPABLE.com. Or for you military inclined, Bravo, Echo, Uniform, November, Sierra, Tango, Oscar, Papa, Alpha, Bravo, Lima, Echo, Dot, Charlie, Oscar, Mike. All right. He has another website, actually. The Alden Mills website is located at aldenmills.com. That's Alden-Mills, Alpha, Lima, Delta, Echo, November, Mike, India, Lima, Sierra.com. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast using whatever podcast service you listen to us on. We'd really appreciate it. Visit betteranlife.com when you get a chance. Read some of our blogs, make some comments, share it with your friends. Until next time, have a great day.